unless it's my bill being heard. So we only pray for my bills, but we're glad that you're here. And House Bill 62, Representative Jacobs, would you come and present your bill? Yeah, you may pray if you'd like. I'm sure there's somebody here praying for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And of course, in my case, the prayer would need to be in.
We all pray to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring before the committee House Bill 62. I also want to make sure there's a substitute that cleans up some of the language as the bill was originally introduced. There's really no substantive change from the original bill as introduced to the substitute. The substitute is LC 333993S.
Okay, and all the members should have that in your folder. Okay.
Okay, this is, what you have before you is a cleanup bill to the special needs scholarship bill that came through the House a couple of years back. A few issues have arisen with respect to both the application of the language of the original law and with respect to rulemaking by the Department of Education as to how the original provisions of the bill are to be carried out. The purpose of the bill, of course, is to clean up those areas. Section 1 of the bill deals with notice. There is concern because right now the provisions of the law do provide for notice, but they don't really provide for what form that notice needs to be provided in or what needs to be said. What we're doing with Section 1 is making it very clear what needs to occur in terms of providing notice to parents of students with disabilities who would be eligible for the special needs scholarship. It provides a very specific form for that notice on lines 16 through 20 of the bill. It also provides for the means by which that notice would have to be provided, which is to some extent in the original law, but we do provide for a first-class mail or electronic mail notice on a regular basis, and then also notice at each IEP meeting where the school would be meeting with parents of a student with disability. Section 2 of the bill deals with a rulemaking issue, or actually a couple of issues with respect to rulemaking issues that have come up with the department. One of them is that, first of all, the Department of Education has put forward a rule that in essence says you have to have, looking at paragraph 3 there, starting on line 26, they have come forward with a rule that says that you have to have an IEP in place for a full year prior to applying for the special needs scholarship. Well, the result of that is that you can have a student who is diagnosed with a disability sometime in the middle of the year, and they would have to wait through the end of that school year and the entire next school year, so in excess of a year, in order to apply for the special needs scholarship. It appears to me to be an intentional impediment put in the scholarship that was not contemplated by the General Assembly. And so all we're saying is that with the changes there on lines 27 through 29 is that you have to have had an IEP put in place, regardless of when it's put in place. So if you are diagnosed with a disability, an IEP is put in place, then that would then give you the ability to qualify for the special needs scholarship, regardless of and doesn't create this year-long, year-plus process that is tied to when the student is diagnosed with a disability. Then looking at lines 30 through 33, we are giving parents more opportunities with different dates, August 1st, October 1st, and March 1st, to apply for and to qualify for the special needs scholarship. And then finally, in Section 3 of the bill, there have been some issues. The current law says, just simply, the current law says that the department has to make payments payments of the special needs scholarship to parents on a quarterly basis. Doesn't define what the quarters are. We have here a very specific provision that makes it clear when the quarterly payments have to be made, what quarters they correspond to, and then also if you qualify, if you start with the scholarship after the first day of the school year, how a prorated payment is to be made for that quarter in which you're only there part-time. And basically what it says is that a prorated payment has to be calculated for that quarter, and then it is paid with the full payment payment date that corresponds to the next quarter. So that's how that would work. I also want to recognize Jamie Self from the Georgia Family Council, who can speak to the bill a little bit and to some of the difficulties that have arisen with respect to the implementation of the Special Needs Scholarship Program. And then both of us, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, would be happy to yield to questions.
All right. Very good. Ms. Self.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I don't know that I need to say much more than Representative Jacobs already did in explaining the bill. The reason that we are bringing this before you today is because of a lot of the testimony that we have heard from participating schools and from students and their parents who are active in the program. And while it's been very successful for the students involved, there certainly are things that if they continue in the way that they are working out right now might threaten the program, certainly limits the number of schools that are available to the students, which ultimately limits their options. We just like to see these things cleaned up. Again, I'm happy to help answer any technical questions or explain maybe why some of this stuff is in the bill, but I don't know that I need to say a whole lot more than that, and we'll respect your time.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Self. Now, we have some questions for Representative Jacobs and Ms. Self, if necessary. Representative Long.
Yes. Hey, Representative Jacobs, how you doing? I've got a couple questions, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. The first question, by changing it to first-class mail, the provision that you have on 14, what is that cost more for the particular department, or who encumbers that? Who has the cost?
And actually, I'll tell you what, that was that would be incurred by the school system. I would be okay now that I look at it. That was a very quick change that was made this morning by yours truly. So if you want to change it, if it's the will of the committee to change it back to letter so that the letter could be sent home.
Yeah, it might impose a financial hardship, like, you know.
If it's the will of the committee to amend the bill to change it back to letter, I would not be against.
And the second question, I'll let the chairman. Does that mess you up? I'm not trying to mess you up.
I mean, you are providing more certainty, I think, with first-class mail. You are providing more certainty that the letter gets to
Yeah, I agree.
the parents that it is intended to go to if you send it by first-class mail, and
They have to sign.
my
Okay.
intent with that.
Okay.
They
But
have to
I'll
sign
certainly
it.
defer to the will of the committee.
Okay. Well, I'll do the same thing on that. I'm not going to ask for a change on that. I just want to know. Secondly, right here, the individual education program, the IEP, as you referred to it, you said it was an encumbrance of about a year of bureaucracy or something like that. Could you explain? Is that during the course of that year? Does that take place because of some individual details that this particular educational program, IEP, has to go through, or is it just accreditation?
No, when a student is diagnosed with a disability and an IEP is put in place, the problem that has been created is actually a function of Department of Education rulemaking that I would submit to you as outside the intent of the statute as enacted, and that is the department has said that you have to have an IEP in place for a full year before you can qualify for the scholarship. So the end result of that is that you can be diagnosed with a disability and an IEP put into place in the middle of a school year. And in order to qualify for the scholarship, you would have to go through the end of that current school year and then through the entire next school year before you. It could be in theory, okay. I mean, worst case scenario could be a day into the school year. You'd have to go through the end of that entire school year and the entire next school year in order to qualify for the scholarship. And I don't think that would be intended in general sense.
Okay.
That's not so much a function of the individualized education plan, just a sort of qualification that was set forth. And I will say also, just as an addition, that we have had recent meetings with the Department of Education and its new administration, and they have been very receptive to the changes that we're talking about here. That may not have been true previously, but I think that we find that they're very willing to work with us and try to make this successful. We just need to clean up a couple of definitional things.
Even with the cost of the first class meal, because I understand why that would be beneficial, and I know you have to sign for that, but is the department?
Well, the bill also allows for you can do it by email.
Okay.
Just first class, and it does say or by email. So if families have email addresses, they can do it that way, which obviously is
Totally fine. Done.
Okay, thank you. Representative Amerson.
Thank you, sir. I've had probably 30 or 40 letters, emails on this particular subject, and all of them say vote for it. Now, having said that, though, I had 2 emails. They say vote for it, but they had some problems, and I'd like for you to address that. One was from a mother who says that there's no way she could have ever have put her son in a public school for a year. Okay? So why should she be forced to put the child in school for a year just so she can get an IEP that's been that long and help pay for the schooling of the particular child?
Well, I mean, for starters,
Is that a rule of the?
No, that's
current law.
That's existing law.
That is the current law. Now, rulemaking by the Department of Education and the bill that you have before you does not roll back the existing law. Okay,
Yep.
so you still have to have an IEP from a school system in order to qualify for the scholarship. What the Department of Education has done is exacerbated that situation and added a whole additional year to the process by saying you have to have an IEP in place for a full year.
I will say that when this bill was passed in 2007, the original intent of the year-long requirement to be in public school before being eligible was a purely financial one. I think the idea was that the state was going to be using the state portion of its money for scholarship purposes, that student would have had to have generated dollars for a full year before sending those dollars with the child. I mean, certainly if there were enough people that felt that that wasn't necessary, it would not be something that we would oppose, but I think that was the original intent, so that it would stay fiscally neutral for the state.
Well, these parents pay property taxes and everything like everyone else. It's just that the particular disability is one that you don't want to have in a public school. Okay, that was one. The second one, the lady said, vote for it. However, there needs to be accountability. And in her case, she said that her child, she had was going to put a child in from the public school, fill out the papers and so forth, and also wrote a check. Well, I guess the parents have to pay some portion. Well, as it turned out, the child did not go to that particular school, and she never could get her money back. And she didn't know what happened to the scholarship money for that child either. So what kind of accountability do you have in terms of the number of children in school, et cetera, and how much the state pays?
Well, I would say that that is, I mean, at the end of the day, that is addressed by departmental rulemaking. You know, there is, my intent with the bill is not to change the current operation of the program by and large. It is to address specific problems that have come up with the administration of the program as a result of either how it has been carried out or direct rulemaking by the Department of Education. I'll submit to you, Chairman Amerson, I don't think it's possible for the bill to be a cure-all for every situation that comes up with the scholarship in that regard. But I do your concern though is well taken and well stated.
Well, I agree you can't fix in the bill, but I was hoping there might be some people here from the Department of Education willing to listen as we spoke.
There probably are, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Amerson. Representative Ash.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, on line 13, I see the word all enrolled students. Does that mean every student in a school gets a copy of this notice either by email or first class letter? Why would all students need to get it?
That I mean that is what that says, Representative Ash. If again, I mean that could be an issue that could be addressed by limiting that language to students who have an IEP. That's really at the will of the committee, but that is how that is worded. I mean, that is how I read that, and that is what it requires.
That's sort of how I read it, too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then in Section 3, there's a very specific payment schedule. How does that payment schedule fit into the way DOE funds schools? Is that a smooth flow, or are these separate dates that are unrelated to the DOE's normal operation?
I believe they were intended to flow smoothly, and actually Jamie and I discussed this point within the last couple of days. So if you want,
that may have been a separate point. To be honest, I'm not sure if it coincides with how the Department of Education funds traditional public schools. My guess, my understanding anyway, is that the funding of traditional public schools happens on a significantly more frequent basis than quarterly. This was set up just for obviously this program, and some of the dates are specific to certain issues that have arisen. For instance, if checks are issued in the name of the parent and the parent has to restrictively endorse them to the school, sometimes it's happened where checks have gone out sort of in the middle of the summer, and the schools have had a very hard time tracking down parents, and they only have a short window to get that signature, et cetera, et cetera. So some of these dates have to do with what makes sense in terms of being able to get the parents in to restrictively endorse the checks over, but I would not guess that they are operating on the same schedule that public schools are funded. And if that would be the will of the committee, my guess is it would be a lot more frequently than quarterly that would happen. This just seems like it might be easier to manage to do it quarterly rather than say monthly.
Mr. Chairman, I would hope that we hear from DOE about how that's going to work.
And they do make quarterly payments now. It's just not necessarily, they don't have dates certain. So different schools receive them at different times, and it's caused some issues.
Okay, thank you. Representative Hatfield?
I think I've got 3 questions. First of all, am I correct that this is, we call it a special needs scholarship, but what this is a voucher? Am I correct?
It is a needs specific voucher, yes.
Okay. And second question is, do you have any idea why this is in higher ed rather than an education committee?
What I can tell you is that the speaker assigned the bill to higher education, and there was no communication between the author or any proponent of this bill with the speaker's office prior to that.
Okay. The other question is, do you have any idea how the organizations, let me preface this by saying back in 2007, I believe it was, when this was created, the developmental disability community was largely opposed to this, or at least there was a segment of it that was opposed to it. Maybe not largely, but there was a segment of it that was opposed to this. Do y'all know either of you know, what is the position of organizations such as the Arc of Georgia or any of the other developmental disability organizations on this bill?
That I do not have an answer to. You know, what I do know is that I have heard, you know, prior to the passage of SB 10, I heard from parents of students with disabilities in my district in favor of that piece of legislation, and I have heard from parents of students with disabilities in my district in favor of this piece of legislation. I cannot speak for the organization. And I've not been approached with them, you know, and this bill has been pending since almost the beginning of the legislative session.
Fair enough. But you do bring up a point which interests me, and I would say this, that you're hearing from people in your area about it, and the people that I've gotten emails from are mostly around the metro Atlanta area because that's where all the private schools are. Down in my area in southeast Georgia, we don't have any private schools for people to be able to use this voucher. And frankly, our local school system does a pretty good job of being able to provide services for developmentally disabled children. So I just wanted to share that with you, and thank you for answering the questions.
Thank you, Ms. Hackett.
Thank you, Representative Hatfield. Also, I asked the question of the proper assignment of this bill myself and had a conversation with the chairman of the House Education Committee. I offered to move this bill into his committee. He insisted it remain in this committee, and I think he understands that in this particular committee there is superior intellect and ability to deal with such legislation, so that's why we have it before us. Representative Gardner.
The superior intellect. My question is on page 2, line 12, the specific dates. I certainly applaud you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing additional.
Wait, page 2, line.
I'm sorry, line 32.
Okay.
Additional opportunities for the applications. But the March 1st deadline doesn't really compute for me. Is that for the subsequent year, or is it for the year, the end of the year, which is almost over?
It would.
You have a,
yeah, no, it's that. I mean, what you see there are dates within a school year.
Right.
Okay, so that is March 1st, toward the end of a school year.
So the child presumably could start in April and be in the school for April and May?
I will explain this a bit further and let you know that when we initially started talking about providing additional enrollment opportunities for parents, what really is desired from a lot of people is just that they be able to go at any point in the year. One of the things that we got feedback from was that given the way that we fund public education with FTE counts being in October and March, that this may be cleaner. We are still investigating and certainly are having conversations with the Department of Education in Florida where a similar program exists, and hopefully with our Department of Education to see if there's a way that we can do this, you know, where we figure out a mechanism to fund parents properly regardless of when they leave. But until we do that, this is the only way that we could ensure that that children not be paid for twice, if that makes sense. I know it's not an ideal
date,
to me
now that it's when they do the FTE.
I know, and it's not ideal, but it is what it is for right now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Who do we have? Representative Sims? Yes, go ahead.
Question I have kind of falls on what Representative Hatfield said. Now, how does this affect higher ed? I mean, do we get scholarships at the college and adult tech education level from a kid with an IEP?
No, it doesn't affect higher ed at all. And again, I
understand.
I honestly do not have an answer to that question.
So we're an unbiased group. Okay, okay. The second.
I want to be real clear on that in case there are any more questions on that.
I just wanted you to realize that when I came in, the intellect of this committee went way down. Okay. Let me ask this, and just a follow-on question. as far as an IEP is concerned, now are we talking about a kid with a very, for lack of better terms, bad problem, maybe an autistic child, maybe a child with cerebral palsy or something that's maybe coming in during the year, and we're not talking? Are we still talking about a kid that may have dyslexia or what is that, the Asperger's syndrome or something like that?
The answer is all of the above, and if you look at this, part of the code, that deals with the special needs scholarship, there's a definition of who qualifies. I mean, there are.
I understand. I just didn't see that part of the act or the part of the bill, and so
the answer to your question is all of the above.
All of the above. So, if a kid was, say, in a public setting, needed to go to a private setting, maybe had some kind of disability that this would let him transfer mid-year. That's what you're trying to get at. That sometime during the year, maybe they hadn't found that his problem or her problem until a certain time during the year, and then they thought at that point in time they needed to transfer because, i.e., the system didn't have anybody to take care of them or whatever. Is this the reasoning behind the bill? That's what I'm just trying to get at.
Yeah, I mean, the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Well, I think we're going around the horn again. Representative Huckabee?
I'd like to return to Representative Ash's issue on page 1, line 13. It seems that the existing language in the Act limits the notification requirement to the parents of students who have a disability, and your revised language expands that to all students. That's going to be far more expensive. What is the rationale for enlarging the universe that greatly?
Well, Representative Huckabee, I am willing to, again, I will defer. I'll go, well.
Give them a way that they can get their child educated. I think that's the reasoning behind it. I don't know if that is, but I'm trying to get it.
Well, and I think that's right. I mean, diagnoses of special needs can happen any time. Remember, the notice that's provided here is really to be provided on an annual basis and at IEP meetings. But the reality is the notice goes out one time each year. So, and also it can be provided either, a school system that has a good, that actually engages in collecting email addresses of parents and has one for the parent of each child in the school system can just do it via email. It's either or. It's not both. So, so I think the answer is that that you can have a diagnosis of a special needs student in the middle of a year after the notice has been sent on an annual basis. Now, how exactly we do this is ultimately, the will of the committee, but that would be the rationale for it.
Representative Jacobs, if the letters are not sent out to all parents, then there would be the stark possibility that there would be a parent of a child affected who would not receive the notice.
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay. So it would have to go to all parents.
That's correct.
Okay. Chairman Amerson.
First, a question of you, sir. Do you plan on putting this in a subcommittee?
No, I do not. Representative. Oh, okay.
That was the question of you, sir.
The IEP, how long does it take after a child goes to public school for an IEP to be developed?
Well,
The first day?
It takes a diagnosis of a special need, and then the school system puts an IEP in place. I mean, that's how that works.
All right, but who diagnosed the special need?
It just
The IEP is ultimately determined.
Or a child psychologist or child psychiatrist, either one.
Now, with this, the way it's written now, you don't wait a year. As soon as you get an IEP, you can literally transfer. Is that correct?
correct.
So I can tell this mother.
Well, at the next opportunity that's spelled out in the
Well, how
bill. Remember, there are 3 dates in there.
Okay, so she's helpless then. We can't change her you diagnose her today, diagnose the child today, get an IEP, and move on tomorrow.
Well, again, you've got to wait until the next of the 3 dates. I mean, that's we can't cure everything with the bill. We are doing the best we can, and it certainly is more efficient than the current process that's in place.
You go right ahead, Chairman Sims.
I had a kid that has an IEP because he had dyslexia. Okay, it takes a long time to make a diagnosis. You've got to take the kid, you've got to go, and you've got to do all this thing. Now, my kid is now doing very, very well. He's in college, doing very fine. But at the time, we couldn't figure out why he was writing everything backwards and upside down. And he couldn't do math, and we couldn't figure it all out. And it took me, he was in the 2nd grade, and we were having this trouble. Once we got the diagnosis and we got the IEP, he got special help at school. He went to public school, but they had special help that was there, that was provided for him. He could do it after school or during school. And it made all the difference in the world for my child, and he's become a very, very productive citizen, I think, in the long run. This was long before this ever existed.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Sims, representing Long.
I don't want to. I think it's a great bill, Mike. I don't want to, beat a dead horse, but how are you going to answer the question with other members of the educational committee, in the ante rooms, or just, they're going to push us down the steps? How are you going to answer the individual question of those members who might feel slated that they didn't get a chance to voice this bill?
I will be happy to talk to each and every one of them. And I introduced the bill anticipating it was going to the Education Committee.
I love you, Mr. Chairman, but you have to answer to those individual legislators.
Well, as I stated
hopefully
earlier,
they won't push me down the
as I
stairs.
stated earlier, the chairman of the House Education Committee and I had this conversation. I offered to move it. In fact, I practically insisted on moving it, and it was insisted that it stay here. So we're here. I don't know.
I don't have a reason. All I can tell you is that I talked with no one ahead of the assignment of this bill about where it's going to be assigned. I have co-sponsors on the bill that anticipate an assignment to the Education Committee.
Okay.
If you look at who the co-sponsors are.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Ash.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I think there are different interpretations of conversations about where this bill is, and I'm not going to go there. But we have opened a section of law, and so let me ask some questions about it. IEPs, how are they performed? Who performs them? And is there not an IEP conference every year with students who have them?
There is. I'm not the expert on how IEPs are performed. I will readily admit that. Okay, I do know that they are put in place after a special need is diagnosed, and I do know that they tend to occur on an annual basis after that. And I mean that's.
And if they do occur on an annual basis, and if at each one of these IEP meetings there must be discussion of this provision, why would we need to inform all parents every year?
That again, that is. The notice is provided on an annual basis. You can and I gave you the justification for that. Now, the committee can accept or not accept that justification, and certainly I will carry forward the bill that emerges from this committee. But the answer is that you can have a that the notice outside of the IEP setting is supposed to be provided on an annual basis, so it happens once each year. And you can have a diagnosis you can have a diagnosis in the middle of the year.
And is it not true that at that diagnosis and at that conference, this bill would require notice to be given to the parents as they are learning of the IEP?
That is true.
And as they're learning of the renewal of the IEP year after year?
That is true as well.
How many students take advantage of these scholarships?
That I don't have an answer to.
It's just over 2,500 students.
And what's their geographic spread across the state?
It varies. Certainly, I would say that we actually in the office have a map with pins in it, and they're a little bit everywhere, but they're more concentrated in the metro area.
What are the accountability measures that follow these public dollars to these private institutions through the parents?
In the original law, there were several things set forth, requirements on participating schools that accept students. For one, there was fiscal accountability measures. There were accreditation measures. Testing has to be done on the students and reported back both to the Department of Education and to parents annually. Those are several, to name a few. I could probably pull out the law and remember what they all are, but.
And how is that reporting gone, and to whom do those accountability reports go?
They go to primarily the Department of Education. The Department of Education will not allow a school to accept students under this provision unless they meet the requirements of fiscal accountability and that they are accredited or in the process of being accredited. And then all of the testing that is performed for students that accept the scholarship is reported back to both the parent and the department aggregates this data on their website yearly in an annual report that is available to the legislature and the public.
Let me interrupt for just a moment here. Several years ago, many of you on this committee remember Senate Bill 10, which I believe was one of the most important pieces of legislation that we've passed out of the General Assembly in my 9 terms. And Representative Ash, you remember that during the debate on that bill, many of these issues were raised, and we've had that debate. And Senate Bill 10 is in place now. And I think what we have before us with House Bill 62 is simply an attempt, and I think a very good attempt by the General Assembly to make it more not only convenient to parents of special needs children, but to give it some structure and some consistency. And so that's the essence, I believe, of of House Bill 62 that we have before us today. And so I think the conversation of the merits or the lack of regarding Senate Bill 10 in its original form, I think that might be a discussion for another day.
I will so admit, but as this committee is dealing with a topic that this committee has not dealt with, it seemed important to me that we have some understanding of what we're looking at.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, both of you. Thank you. Are there any of who is here to? First of all, I'd like to. Is there anyone here from the Department of Education who'd like to speak to this measure? Yes. Come, please. And if you would take this seat, please, and just state to the committee your name and position, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tom Wilson, Director of Government Affairs for the DOE. Relatively new in this position, so.
Go right ahead.
The position of the department is we certainly don't have any issues with the intent of the bill. some of the concerns that were raised regarding notifying all students. We'd like to discuss that further because we feel like students that have an IEP are notified. Those that get an IEP are notified in the current language. The biggest issue we would like to talk about is just some of the mechanics of the dates regarding...
Now, stop just a moment. The notification is to parents of these children who are developmentally disabled. The notice does not go to the student.
Oh, I'm sorry,
it goes
I'm
to
parent.
the parent of the student. Okay, you may proceed.
I agree.
Okay, you may proceed.
And the main issue we'd like to talk about further is just the dates, the timing of FTE counts, because of the way the funding and the QB formula works is the biggest concerns we have. Is we feel like we can work that out, but we certainly have no problems with the intent and the ability to make this more affordable to students.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Wilson? Go right ahead, Chairman Amerson.
My one question has to do with money accountability as raised by this particular mother who said she filled out the papers for the voucher and wrote a check and never got any money back from that particular school.
Yeah, I really can't answer that. I don't know. I can certainly find out. If I knew her name, we can track that down and find out what the problem was. I'd be glad to do that.
Well, no, I'm just interested in the number of vouchers that go to a particular school. You have count of that, right? And you know if a student did in fact enter the school under that voucher.
Yes, sir. We have that information.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Representative Ash.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being with us, Ms. Wilson. You say there's some problems with the dates. Can you tell us how we could fix it?
I had our policy obviously look at this, and for example, the August 1st date that's in the bill.
Must be line 32.
Yeah, it's under. It's in section 3.
Oh. Well, line 32 is not in section 3.
I'm sorry, section 2.
Section 2. Okay, good.
For example, the August 1st date. Public and private schools have multiple start dates, most taking place after August 1st. And the internal proposed date of September 15th makes more sense to the DOE because it gives parents an opportunity to make a change once all schools are in, and they've only been in school about a month. So it makes it, those kind of date issues, just as far as carrying out the bill, will make it more seamless, we believe, for the students.
Shouldn't we get these right before we move on? Keep going. September 15th.
At the October 1st date, this date would cause problems for school district as they complete the October FTE after October 1st. The internal proposed date of December 15th makes more sense just from the accountability piece on the October FTD or FTE count. And a lot of children move during the Christmas holidays from one school to the next and can transfer during that time. In my experience has been it's easier to transfer during those breaks as far as assignment of classes. Obviously with IEP it's pretty dictated, but as far as the receiving private school and the sending public school. And the same as the March 1st date, because of the March FT is after March 1st. as I said, the September 15th, the December 15th, and then after the March 15th, or the March FTE.
Mr. Wilson, thank you so much for being with us today. The chair recognizes Representative Harden for a motion.
Due to some members not being present and some need to leave to be in the governor's office and whatnot, I'd like to make the appropriate motion to postpone the continuance of this until we can have more people who are interested in this issue.
There's a motion to postpone the consideration of House Bill 62 by substitute. Is there a second? There is a second. Any other further discussion? All in favor of postponement say aye. Aye. All opposed no. And the ayes have it, and we will postpone further deliberation of House Bill 62.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Maddox, we're so glad to see you today. I think before we move on, I do want to recognize Dr. Susanna Baxter, who is here with us today. She's the president of the Georgia Independent College Association. She is also the former CEO of a Tennessee private college association, and we're so glad you're wearing the red and the black and the gold and the white rather than the orange and the white now. Thank you. Never wore the orange. Well, I like you better already. Thank you. Dr. Maddox, you are with us, and we are now considering House Bill 60.
Want me to sit down or stand up?
What would you like to do, Dr. Maddox?
I'd like to stand up here.
That'd be fine.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members. Listen, I bring you a simple bill today, which is House Bill 60. This is a much-needed bill. What I'd like to do, first of all, is tell you why it's needed and then tell you what it will accomplish. You know, I'm a retired veterinarian, and when I first finished veterinary school, I did 100% almost of large animal work. As the years have passed on, the veterinary medicine has progressed into a different realm, and now most of them do small animal or companion animal. And so the older veterinarians like myself are retiring. Dr. Eunice Daddy was one of them. But anyway, what's happened now, the younger vets coming on, they can make much more money in a small animal and not have to go outside. They don't have to buy these expensive trucks. They don't have to have an assistant to go out with them. And while I'm out on a farm call making, say, less substantial money, they are making much more. And that's what's happening. So we patterned this after the rural MDs, Dr. Watson. You remember that came about a few years ago, was trying to get some new MDs out into it. And so Ben Strickland came and helped me write this bill up back about 3 years ago. And what this bill does, it will entice a young graduate veterinarian to go before this educational veterinary board, which will be made up of the dean of the veterinary college, the dean of the agriculture college, the commissioner of agriculture, a producer who produces food animals, and a veterinarian who treats food animals. This committee then will sit down, talk to a young veterinarian, and agree to purchase his a loan if he or she will go into one of these areas. There are 46 counties in Georgia now that does not have veterinarians that's giving food animal service. And so when I came along, we helped eradicate tuberculosis, brucellosis, pseudo-rabies, and the list goes on and on. And here's what had happened. Tonight, if you had a sick calf or a sick food animal and you couldn't find a help for it, you either got to let it lay there and die or haul it maybe 100 miles or carry it into whatever you're going to get to school. And so there's a great need for it. The enticement here is to purchase their loan in increments of $20,000 with a maximum of 5 students. And so what would happen was, once this student graduates and he or she decides to want to go into one of these counties, they'd go before this educational board, they'd sit down with them and agree to go to one of these deficit areas where a veterinarian was needed, and if they agreed to go, then they would choose their own practice, set it up, no charge to anything until after 1 year. After 1 year, if they fulfill their service agreement by going out and making calls, they didn't have to do 100% food animal, but they had to go if you called tonight, and if they got too many complaints that they were not doing their service, then they would be canceled. If they agreed to do it and they stayed, then they would purchase $20,000 once a year for 4 years, a maximum of $80,000. I have a grandson that just got accepted to Cornell University in New York. It's going to cost him $250,000 to go up there. And it's just terrible. There's some of these exorbitant salaries, tuition is going out now. And so it will help to entice these young ones to go in. All I can tell you is that not only would it help the producer there that has veterinary service, but if you have a outbreak of some disease, then you have a veterinarian to help. Right now, if Dr. Black down here is our state veterinarian, had an outbreak of some disease that come in from another country, who would he have to help him? It'd be terrible. So I ask you to help me pass this. I think it's needed. I do realize that we're in an economy now where it costs the state $100,000, but $100,000 is mighty microscopic to the outbreak if we could get some veterinarians out. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you, Dr. Maddox. And I think it's important for us to note that this particular loan and the funding of this loan is subject to the appropriations process
exactly
in the General Assembly.
It'll come through the General Assembly's appropriation, and unless you appropriate it, it wouldn't be able to take the contract.
Thank you. And I think we're going to, is it? Okay. Chairman Sims.
Dr. Maddox, just on a note, as you know, down in our area, we've got a terrible problem with feral hogs now, and of course, pseudo-rabies is going on, and I know that some of these 46 counties that you're talking about have this issue. We also have the likelihood of brucellosis showing back up, which we had eradicated in this area. If you don't know what that'll do, if you've got horses or cows or things that you've got there, it can devastate your animals. And I think this is a great thing that you're trying to do here, and I just want to appreciate what you're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Ash?
No.
Oh, you're, okay. And Representative Huckab? No. Any other questions? You are recognized for, is there anyone who'd like to speak?
I did not ask anybody. The dean of the veterinary school wanted to come and 2 or 3 others. I said, let me do it by myself because these guys are ready to go home.
Well, you did it wonderfully, Dr. Maddox. It's been an interesting meeting of the House Higher Education Committee, to say the least. I assume all these animals that you're talking about are advanced animals in their education. All right. Representative Long is recognized for a motion. There is a motion due pass, and there is a second. Any other discussion? All in favor of due pass on House Bill 60 signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed, no. And due pass House Bill 60. Thank you. Dr. Maddox. This, if you remember, we do have another committee meeting scheduled for Tuesday at 3 o'clock, if you'll remember that. And this committee now is adjourned. Thank you.